put the recording on. There we go. Okay. So you've all done research method courses, and I was talking earlier about what citation style you're most accustomed to. Maria, Sam, what citation style were you doing when you were doing your research method courses?
APA.
APA. Maria?
Yeah, it was the same one. I just couldn't remember the name.
Okay, APA. And then you said that you actually did Chicago, right?
For me, I did.
Yeah. Okay. So, you know, the general rule of thumb in the social sciences is APA. So my thinking is you should probably stick with it. I'm hesitant because I prefer Chicago, but I'm in a different field. My main area is obviously the humanities and literature. And we're going to look at that. If you really want to use the Chicago, I won't object, but I would strongly urge you to give serious consideration, because in your field of study, APA is what's used the most, okay? And what we're going to look at is some APA, just to make sure we're all on the same page. It should be reviewed for you. And for Leah, as a Lay or Lee? Remind me, sorry?
Lay.
Lay. So Lay, if you're finding it, you know, troublesome to follow the APA, let me know. But for now, I would like us to go APA. Okay? And if it's a problem with it, we can discuss it, and I'll accommodate, but the most important thing is to be consistent. And this is important, right? For the type of project you guys are doing, the citations need to be exact. Right? You're anticipating that this is going to be seen by people in power, and if the citations aren't done properly, then again, that speaks to your credibility. Right? I have much more lax in the literature courses because obviously it's a very different approach. So keep that in mind. This is important. When you were doing your research method courses, where did your instructor direct you to do your research? What databases? Did he or she give you clear directions as to where to find peer-reviewed articles? Or were you left on to your own to just try to find something out there in the cyber world?
Yeah, so sometimes it was journals. They asked us like a bunch of stuff. So one from an electronic journal, one from a book, one from another, you know, different types of sources and stuff like that.
Good.
So I mean, it kept us busy, but.
All right, no, that's important. I need to know, I'm trying to get a feel for how familiar you are with it, so that you can get to the right sources. For this project, any of those are acceptable. Okay, I mean, the issue, of course, with if you're going to be using books require a lot more reading than articles.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm more than happy for you to use a book, a chapter from a book, however you want to approach it. But I would imagine the majority of the research you're going to be doing is sifting through peer-reviewed databases, okay, that will lead you to peer-reviewed articles that you can use. So if you're going to go and look for an appropriate, relevant electronic article, where do you go? How do you start that? Do you just Google it? Anyone? Sam?
Sorry?
How did you go about finding the articles? Like, how would you start that process of research?
Just online, like just look up any sources that you could find.
So just going through Google?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, did anyone talk to you about Google Scholar?
Yeah, I've heard of Google Scholar, but I was at Dawson when I took research methods. So they
Okay.
give us they have like their website, and you could just look up the sources from their website.
Yeah, we don't have that here at TAB, I don't
Yeah.
think. Yeah, no, and that's similar to what we find over at the university as well. Yeah, they have things in place that send you straight to the databases that have peer-reviewed articles. So it's a bit more of a challenge for us here at TAB because we don't have those databases set up, and to access the best databases, you need to be affiliated with an educational institution, put in a password that gives you access to it. So that being said, the best place to probably go from our perspective is through Google Scholar. Right? Is everyone familiar with Google Scholar? Never heard of it?
Yeah, I used it for my other class for research methods. Now that I'm remembering.
Okay. And Lei, you as well? You're familiar with Google Scholar?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm just trying to make sure that I understand where you guys are from and you've taken these research courses. So I think you're all going to be fine as to terms of navigating through the tremendous amount of information out there and really pinpointing. If you're having issues, obviously you can contact me. I would suggest going through Google Scholar. Are any of you familiar with JSTOR? And again, I did hear that they might be. No, they did. It's taken off. Not yet. No, never mind about that. That you need a institution to get you into that. So use the Google Scholar. We'll come back and we can talk about that again when we finish up today, if you want, or next week as you get going. So annotated bibliography. I've got a document. Oh, what's this? Hold on. You can use JSTOR with a bank account? Is that BANQ? What is that? Is that Lei? Is that what account is that? Bank, like banking it? Oh, bibliotech. Something. Bibliotech. Something. Do you guys have those accounts?
Not me.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you have access to JSTOR and you're familiar with it, JSTOR covers a lot of different fields of study, but there's stuff there. But if you can't have if you can't access the JSTOR, Google Scholar, or whatever other avenues you were shown when you took the research method course that you have access to, same in your case. Okay. All right. So let me pull this document up and we'll just run through it. Make sure we're all clear on what's expected here. Okay, so an annotated bibliography. What is an annotated bibliography? Have you guys done annotated bibliographies before? Anyone?
Not really.
Okay. So an annotated bibliography is basically you're going to have that citation for the work that you're using, but you are going to annotate it. You are going to add to it. All right. So let me just get this up. And if this is repetitive for some of you, fine. There's nothing wrong. Repetitiveness gets it to drop deeper into your long-term memory. What an annotated bibliography does is it gives an account of the research that has been done on a given topic, right? It's alphabetical. In addition to bibliographic data, an annotated provides concise summary of each source and, very importantly, some assessment of its value or relevance. An annotated bibliography, after you cite the source, the annotations are very short, 150, 200 words, maximum 300. Okay, you can, I have no problem if you want to go up to 300, if that gives you, lets you sink your teeth into it more. But what you're doing is, yes, you have to give some element of a summary, but that you don't need to put too much of the summary in there. What is really important with the annotated bibliography is the assessment of its value or relevance, how it has a direct correlation to your project. Okay? And in our case, it is one stage of a larger research project. Okay, sometimes it can be independent, but that doesn't concern us. Okay, so selecting the sources, you need to, and this, why I want to go over this in detail is this is also going to alert you to how you should be thinking for that final project as well. This is all now starting to gear directly towards that final project. You need to define the scope of your research carefully. All right, you can't include everything. Right, most of you are dealing with subject matter that much has been written about. So you need to really zoom in, narrow your parameters as much as possible when you're doing the research. Otherwise, you're going to be having to go through so much. Right, this is the messy business of research. That's the importance of the abstracts. Right, so when you're looking through the articles, when you find them, most of them, if they're peer-reviewed scholarly articles, are going to have an abstract. And that abstract, you read that abstract, that should tell you whether or not this is something that you should consider. One of the ways that I approach it when I do my research is I go through the abstracts, and everything that seems to be relevant, I put in a folder. Right? And often that folder gets pretty big. I'm not going to use all those sources, but that's the first step in the first process of doing your research. Oh, this one seems to be related to my subject, and put it here. This one does, this one does. Then once I've gone through that process and say I have 10, 15 articles, but I'm only going to be using 5, then I go through them again in more detail, reading the abstract, and try to pick, of those 15, shortlist it down to maybe 7 or 8. Then those 7 or 8 are the ones you have to read to know which are going to be the most important to your project. So you can see that takes time. And often you're going to come across, because they're scholarly articles, peer-reviewed articles, or sources, it's not an article, something else, is some of them are going to be lengthy. Don't pick, please, don't just pick articles based on their size. Oh, this one's only 3 pages, so I'm going to take that one. This one's 10 pages. No, I'm not going to look at it. Okay? You've got, again, time management. That 3-page one may, in fact, be perfect, but that 10-page one may be perfect as well. Okay, not perfect. Good. I don't believe in perfection. All right? So be prepared. And once you determine which 5 you're going to use, okay, you get down to that short list, and that short list could be 6 or 7, then you'll be able to zoom in on the 5 and then take a break once you have determined which 5 you're using, and then read them a second time attentively. These are going to be the foundation in many respects of your final project. That's when you're taking notes, and the notes you're going to be taking when you're reading those articles, you will extrapolate from those notes the things you're going to include in your annotated bibliography. Okay? So you have to define that scope, well-defined boundaries, and then these are some questions to consider, right? So now it comes back to being comfortable with your project. You all should be at this point. What problem am I investigating? Or what questions am I trying to pursue? Okay. Research, you'll have that research question. We know this. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail. You can, and you should read through this, and you can read, so I don't have to read it to you. In order to define your research, what you're going to be doing when you're typing in and doing your research, you want to know what keywords you're going to be looking for. This is why you have to have clear direction as to what your project's going to be. Okay, so formulate your search criteria. Think about it before you start doing it. You'll see words will pop up that you know are going to be relevant. What kind of material are you looking for? Right? It's mainly going to be journal articles. Could be books. It could be government reports or policy statements. Some of you, many of you, are dealing with projects that could involve that. And that becomes, right, you have to go elsewhere to find that material. Right? That means you can go to government sites if it's relevant to your, right, if you're looking for what is the government policy on this or that, then search it that way. And not everything has to be done through Google Scholar. Articles from popular press, unlikely you're going to be using that. Unlikely you're going to be using primary historical sources. You could, but be careful with that, right? Because you're only looking for 5. Because remember, you are going to have a background section of your report, so some historical context can be very helpful. But again, depending on your project. And you are looking for essential studies. Okay, and this is a good tip here, is look at the footnotes and see what sources they use. I do this all the time. If I'm, even sometimes before I read the article, I'll flip to the back and I'll look what their sources were. What kind of sources were they using to write their article or their book? And if I see that they are scholarly sources, okay, that is a good sign that they are proceeding in a similar manner. Okay? So think about that carefully. Look at those. Often the articles, the type of articles you'll be looking at won't have too many references at the back. But you want to see, because if all the references are coming from websites you've never seen or are unfamiliar with, or coming from popular press, it's probably not something that's going to lend itself too much to what you're doing. It could, if it ties in with what you are setting out to achieve in the report. Okay, so you might want to bring in popular sentiment regarding this subject, right? Because some of you are looking to organize demonstrations and things like that. So it could be, but be careful. On that note as well, for your annotated bibliography, I want at least 5. If you want to include more, that's fine. And if you decide after you've done the annotated bibliography that there's other source material you want to include in your final report, that's fine too. But for this particular assignment, I want 5. So when you are putting together the annotated bibliography, briefly restates the main argument of the source. Okay. For example, from an academic source, typically identifies its thesis. Yes, right? That you can see the similarity between preparing your annotated bibliography and the assignment that you just did. Okay, because again, it requires careful analytic reading of that source material. And the first thing that you are looking for is to identify what the thesis is. What is the question that the article is dealing with? And that will tell you if it is relevant to your project. All right, so its methods, that's what sources is it using, what kind of data, okay, where is its data coming from, and of course its main conclusion. So again, similar to what you've been doing with the assignment you had, but obviously much shorter. Okay. Keep in mind that identifying the argument of a source is a different task than describing or listing its contents. That's not what the annotation is meant to do. All you're doing then is telling your audience what's in there. You're not explaining its relevance, why the contents are there. Okay, so if you look at these 2 examples, okay, this only lists content, this one. Okay, so let's take a look at what the difference is. And this I'm stressing because it's really important. Okay, so we have our citation. right? And then we have the article discusses recent constitutional legislation as it affects the human rights of Aboriginal women in Canada, the Constitutional Act, its amendment in 1983, and amendments to the Indian Act. It also discusses the implications, et cetera, et cetera. That's just listing things that it does. What you want to be doing is looking for the argument. The article seeks to define the extent of the civil and political rights returned to Aboriginal women in the Constitution Act. You see the difference? This is what you want to be doing. It is in its amendment in 1983 and its amendments in the Indian. The legislation reverses prior laws that denied the Indian status to Aboriginal women who married non-Aboriginal men. Okay, look at the whole thing though. On the basis of the Supreme Court of Canada's interpretation of the Constitution Act in R.V. Sparrow, 1991, McIver, who's McIver? The author of the article, argues that the Act recognizes fundamental human rights in existing Aboriginal rights. That's the key. This sets it up. Okay, but ultimately, and you could use exactly this language. John Smith, the author of your article, or Mary Smith, argues that, right? And that way you know that you have identified the argument that the article is making. Okay? And again, you don't have to then draw out, as you did in the assignment that you just handed in, all the thing, how that argument unfolds, because this is an annotated bibliography, not a 2-3 page assignment to analyze the article. You've done that. Research method to conclude the following reading strategies. I know this may seem repetitive. I can't stress these reading strategies. You cannot produce a research report unless you are astute at reading scholarly articles. What do you look for? Again, if it's repetitive, I apologize, but I really want to get this clear. You're identifying the author's thesis, right? Central claim or purpose, just like you develop your own thesis. And yes, attentive to the introduction and the conclusion, but don't use that as an excuse not to read everything in between. Look for repetition of key terms, right? That'll show where the emphasis is. And make sure that the author is unpacking it. You might find an article that really seems to be relevant to your project. But if in the process of reading through it, you find that it is poorly written or poorly researched, you need to be able to recognize that, and you don't want to use it. Okay. Notice how the text is laid out and organized. What are the main divisions or sections, right? Because in your research, you'll see sometimes it'll be just an article that just goes on and on. More likely, because it's the social sciences, it'll be similar to the report that you're going to be producing. There will be sections. How are those sections organized? Okay. What is emphasized and why? Okay, so it's the why that will help you move beyond just listing the contents, all right, and understanding the argument. So when you start reading these articles, as you did with the assignment, you're first and foremost, what is the argument? What is the subject? That goes without saying. And what's the argument that this person is trying to make in relation to that subject? See if they engage in theory as a means of interpretation of the evidence and data. Most of the articles you're going to be looking at, and one of the ways to determine if it's the type of article you're going to want to use, are they including data? If they're not including data, if they're not giving specific evidence, and it's more general, that's a problem, right? Analytic, data. You're going to say, You know, most of the people in this survey believe this. Well, that's telling me nothing. What do you mean by most? Give me the numbers. And when you are doing your research, that's the question you should be asking. If they say something like that in the article that you're looking at, you go, where's the numbers? I don't want most of. I don't want about. If you're gonna, you know, I want to know that 63.255%, based on this survey from this reliable source. If I see that, then I know I got someone who's doing their research. That could be then an article that I want to use. And of course, that alerts you to how you should be writing when you do your report. Okay. And this should be going, again, goes without saying, pay attention to the opening sentences of each paragraph. If it's well written, each paragraph will have basically a topic sentence, right? The author often states concisely their main point in the paragraph. It should always, right? And that way, when you're looking at those topic sentences for each paragraph, it gives you, especially if there aren't clear demarcated divisions in the paper article you're looking at, it's those topic sentences for each paragraph should be clear that this is what's going to be discussed in that paragraph, and you should be able to recognize that it's relevant. Same thing when you're writing yours. There's often paragraphs that summarize the argument, okay? And a section, depending on the breakdown, can begin or conclude with that. It's an important point because often in these types of articles, and I think you've discovered that, I'm sure, in the course of your research, you may be going through the article and it might be getting a little difficult to follow the train. There's all this data and everything else, the train of thought and where the argument's going. Be attentive to that, but then in that particular section of the article, it should, if it wasn't clearly stipulated at the beginning, it should bring it together towards the conclusion of that section. If you read through a section or even a paragraph and you're going, I don't know what they're talking about, that's a problem. Okay? It could be a problem that they're writing for a very particular, more elevated, if you will, audience and using jargon and things like that that you're not familiar with. Or it could be that they're not talking about what you need them to talk about. You want clarity in the articles that you use. Okay? Yes. So assessing the relevance and value of sources, okay? So after you've done this, you've done the reading, then your annotation should now briefly assess the value of the source to an investigation of your research question or problem. That's what you're going to write now. This is your annotation, right? This is what comes after you have laid out the citation, okay? And you're, again, yes, key word here. This article, the articles you choose, need to have value for you, value for your project. If it doesn't have value, if it's not something that is relevant and valuable in terms of your research, it shouldn't be there. So when you're reading it, you're looking, is it clear? Does it have a clear position it's taking? What is the thesis of it? And does this have value for what I am doing in my research? So if a bibliography is part of a research project, which it is in your case, briefly, again, you have to be brief, identify how you intend to use the source and why. Understand that. That means in your annotation, this, once you've done the first part, and you've identified the thesis and the position they're taking and the value it has, you expand on that value. This will lend itself to my position in my report where I will be making this call to action. Tie it into your report. Yes, in this case, you can, you want to relate it specifically to your report. It's a little more personal this way than I'm usually, if you've had courses with me in the past, I'm always like, don't start talking about yourself. Don't use the I, because then it could drift off into being something about your experiences, and what I want is something that is about the question and the text that we are analyzing. Okay? But in this annotated bibliography, you can drop into something that's somewhat like that by saying, for my project, this is why this is valuable. Okay. Assess the sources. Why, if your bibliography is independent, again, we're not doing independent assessment of sources contributing to research on how it doesn't really apply to us. Are you interested in the way the source frames its research question, or in the way it goes about answering it? That is about its method. You want to be attentive. You need to trust this source. Does it make new connections or open up new ways of seeing a problem? Doesn't have to, but you're looking to see, does it? And if it does, this is relevant because it offers a different opportunity in which we can approach this problem. An opportunity that has similarities to the way that I want to address this problem. That's why I'm using this source. Okay? Here, yeah, this one, interested in the way the source uses a theoretical framework. I don't want to get you too bogged down with that. If you're recognizing, if it's something you're familiar with the type of theory that is being employed by that, it doesn't, not sure, because we're looking at reports that are much more practical than theoretical. Okay? Note it if it lends itself to what you're doing, but again, think of practical. A practical application that this article can help you with your practical call for some kind of action vis-a-vis your subject. And again, when it says here, does the source gather and analyze a particular body of evidence? Yeah, you want to see, is it looking at the same types of evidences that you're going to be looking at, that you want to explore, to help substantiate your observation that then leads specifically to what you are going to do to resolve the issue. Okay? Can be the historical development. Be careful with that. You do want historical background, but it doesn't have to be extensive. And of course, this is the most important one. And this is, you want to address this directly. How do the source conclusions bear on your own investigation? John Smith's conclusion that this, that, and the other thing is what's necessary lends itself to my approach, specifically here in Montreal. If you're using a source material that's talking about a similar situation, but in a different geographical location. In order to determine how you will use the source or define its contributions, you will need to assess the quality of the argument. This comes back to value. How is it valuable to you? Why is this, of all the source material you could use, why are you choosing this one? Acknowledge if there are limitations. That's fine. I'm using this article even though it doesn't deal with this and that, which I want to deal with. It thoroughly deals with this component of my research. Right? And you want to acknowledge that in the annotation. Right? You're basically explaining why you've chosen this article, this source material. Okay? How good is the evidence? I mean, at this point, your argument here will be that the evidence is good. Otherwise, you wouldn't be using it. You don't have to necessarily agree with the conclusions that the article has. Important to understand. There may be other elements, other things that this article has done in terms of the research and the data that's being employed that lends itself to what you're doing, even though they may conclude in an alternative way, then the conclusions you're going to want to draw in your report. That's fine. You're drawing from this material that works. But be attentive of their conclusions. If it's not a similar conclusion that you would draw, you need to be sure that the material you're going to use from that source is still relevant and helpful, valuable for your final project. Always keep the context of your project in mind. Everything now is all about your final project. And with that being said, as you do your research, if you're starting to recognize new and different approaches to your final project, not radical shifts in subject matter, but just, oh, maybe I could incorporate this kind of action here because I didn't know about it, and now I'm discovering it through my research. Of course, you can modify. The proposal is just an initial proposal. The whole point of the research is to refine that, to modify it to varying degrees, because you're going to come across material and information that you are not yet aware of. And that will come into play with how you shape that final project. And that may deviate at times substantially to the initial proposal. That's fine. That's what research is all about. The proposal is just to get you started so you have parameters defined. Within those parameters, there's a lot of wiggle room. You're always approaching this with the idea of what is the best way to solve this problem or improve this situation. And of course, the idea is in the course of your research, you're going to learn things. You say, oh, I thought that the best way to do this was just to have these demonstrations and or have a committee to advocate for policy change to go through the government. But now I'm looking to say, oh, there's other ways to achieve these goals. I don't have to go up to Quebec City and try to lobby to meet with Legault and his cabinet. There's actually other avenues by which I can get the word out there. Maybe I'll bypass the government and go straight to the press and get the press involved as a tactic to get the government involved, because the government may not, give me the time of day. So how do I approach that? And at this point, you may not know, but in the course of your research, that may become evident. Various kinds of annotated bibliographies do come in many variations. Pay close attention to the requirements of your assignment. Here are variations. Require you to summarize only and not evaluate. That doesn't concern us, right? Some assignments may want you to notice and comment on patterns of similarities and dissimilarities between sources. Other assignments may want you to treat each source independently. In this case, your sources should have similarities, right? They all need to be geared towards your main topic. If the bibliography is long, consider organizing into sections. Your categories of organization should help you clarify each your research question. Again, this speaks to how long, how big are the annotations. Again, usually 200, can go to 300 words. That's up to you. But it's meant to be concise, and it gets you in, you're moving from the assignment that you just handed in, which is fairly lengthy. Now you're getting much more concise in the annotated bibliography. And that's important as we move towards the final project, where being concise is going to be essential. And you have your abstracts to write and your executive summaries to write. And then even in the body of the report, you need to get rid of all superfluous comments, words, everything. Bang, bang, right to the point. And you want to start engaging in that kind of writing big time now. Less is more, but tougher, because you have to be sure that you are conveying the most important issues in those articles. Yeah, forget about this. Again, it's just talking about the different kinds of annotated bibliography. There are a variety, but I think we're clear on what we want for ours. This is kind of helpful. Seems to be cut off here anyways, but again, you can look at this. This is just speaking towards the writing that you'll be doing, certain vocabulary words that you can use that will keep you focused. You can go through them. You don't have to use these. This is just something there that might be helpful. Things like the author identifies 3 reasons for, the evidence indicates that, the article assesses the effect of, the article questions the view that, okay? It illustrates this, it identifies this, it's evaluating this, it's determining this, okay? These are just good words to have at hand if you're looking to tighten up and get the writing better. All right? You may be familiar with that, you may not need this list, it's just there for your consideration. Okay? So, any questions about this document? I'll be posting this on Sunday, after the Sunday session. But does that help you? Do you have questions about what is expected in this annotated bibliography? 5 sources, and of course this will be explained in the instructions, and 150 to 300 word annotation for each one of those sources. Are we good?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Lay, Maria?
Yep. Yeah.
All good.
Oh, good. Okay. So, you know, we keep these around an hour, so I'm going to wrap up fairly soon. I do want to, how many of you are familiar with the Purdue OWL site? Anyone?
Not aware of that.
Okay. So I'm just going to pull this up. This is like really, it's a very helpful site, but there's a lot there, so you have to be careful when you're navigating through it. Hold on, let me just get here. Wait a minute. Share screen. All right, so this comes out of Purdue University. Okay, it's the Purdue Online Writing Lab. It's OWL, is its OWL. Okay, this is chock full of an overwhelming amount of information. It is, I mean, I use it, and I know it's highly recommended throughout universities and CEGEPs and so on. Again, it's for you to navigate through. You've done, you know how to do citations, but again, since we are talking about APA, unless I can make exceptions, but we want to be thinking about it. You'll find that they have these cite your sources automatically. Right? They have all these devices. Right? I know we have this over at Concordia, and it can be very helpful, but you got to be careful that that you're getting the information when you enter the information, if you choose to use these. Right? And I don't recommend that you do. I'd rather you write it out and do it yourself. This is something that when you have mastered the citation process, I used one of these, the Concordia version of this, when I put together my bibliography for my dissertation proposal, but that bibliography had close to 100 citations. So to type each one of them out, it was kind of tedious. So there's these generators that bring it out in the format you want. I bring it up not to recommend it, but because I know they're out there, but I would suggest for this project, since it's only 5, that you don't need these automatic ones. You do need to know the format. Okay, this is the key. How it's done. brown comma, capital E, the date, the year here, what's being italicized and what's not. All right, different for a book than an article, right? If you look here, right, here we have, again, with more than one author, exactly what you're supposed to do, same format. There's the title, right? In this case, since it's an article, the title is not italicized, the journal is. Up here, since it's a book, it's the title that's italicized. Right? It gets tricky. I do want you to get comfortable with it though, because especially in the social sciences, whether it's at university or whether it's publications, they're sticklers. Right? So I do want you for this annotated bibliography to have it done properly. All right. I recommend if you want to have clarity, this particular site, the Purdue Online Writing Lab, but there's plenty of others. Here, this is what forget. I mean, again, there's so many, but this one was nice as well in terms of really breaks it down and shows you again that this is showing what an annotated bibliography would look like. Right. Here you have your citation, Journal of American Cited Information, the way that you break down the journal entry, okay, the access through the internet, and then in this study, the researchers examined if the internet had affected public library usage in the United States. The study is distinct because its researchers surveyed library non-users as well as users. You see, that's speaking to the methodology. The major finding was, okay, giving the conclusion. However, the researchers surveyed only 3,000 individuals in a population of millions, acknowledging the limitations. However, this study is relevant because it provides future researchers with a methodology for determining the impact of the internet on public library usage. Okay? So that gives you an idea of how it's done, and this is done in the APA. So you know what I'll actually do. Oh, I can't do that. I will put this example up and post it as well, because I think it's a good one. All right, so I'll put that up so you can see exactly what it is. Your annotation can be longer, shorter, but this gives you a good idea, and it also gives you the APA 7th edition. I want the 7th edition, not the 6th. 7th is relatively new. Exactly how you would cite it. Okay. You also find here, again, this is anticipating, we don't have to focus in on this now, in-text citations, which you will be using in your final report. So we will be coming back to this OWL or other APA citation basics. For now, the most important thing is how to cite it as in a bibliography. Okay. How are we doing? Good? Thumbs up? Okay. So I have as well what I was planning on going through, but I think I'll wait because I think this really is what you want to focus on. I have also a PowerPoint that I was going to go through about abstracts and executive summaries. We'll save that. Okay, because I want, again, to be focused now on this annotated bibliography, and then the final project, abstracts and summaries, and some other things dealing with that we can come up next week. We also are going to return to the PowerPoint that we were dealing with last week, because I know it threw a lot of information at you regarding logical fallacies and so on. I will, and I will touch on it again next week. And I do recommend that you look over that PowerPoint again to help you in preparing how to read these articles. You've already done it. That's why I introduced it last week to help you with the assignment that they're handing in now. But review it. Okay, I know the logical fallacies one is a bit much. We will concentrate. I don't want to overdo it with that, but we will return to it. But look it over, because big part of what you're doing with this annotated bibliography is reading in the same manner that you read the article for the assignment that you're handing in now. It all comes down to the need, the necessity of clear, concise, analytic, critical reading. And the better you get at that, the better you're going to communicate your own ideas, the better you're going to be able to write. You spot the issues that other people have, and you say, I know I don't want to do that. And you see when it's good, you say, that's what I want to do. It's all about progress. Okay? I'm going to leave it there unless you have questions or concerns or anything you want to bring up. Again, I will be posting this video as well as the document on annotated bibliographies on Sunday. And then I will be posting the actual assignment for the annotated bibliography sometime this week. And yeah, it should be, I'll double check the calendar, but you should have about 2 weeks. Okay? We good? Yes?
Yes, all good.
Happy? Excited? Loving life?
No.
All right, guys, last thing I'll leave you with, when I'm doing this with you on Fridays or whether you're coming on Sundays, if I'm going too fast, if you feel it's too much, if you're overwhelmed, if there's anything, it's your responsibility to bring it up to me, especially in this format, because I can't see your faces. I don't know what's resonating with you or not. Okay, and I think you've learned by now I'm very approachable, especially in a class like this. I'll repeat what I told you before. I want everyone in this class to do brilliantly. I want you all to have something you're really proud of in terms of your reports at the end. All right, so take advantage, reach out to me. I will meet you one-on-ones, especially as we get closer to the project. But during these sessions, since we're so small and intimate, let me know if there's any concerns you have. Otherwise, I'm not going to know. If I don't know, I can't do anything about it. Okay? Good?
Good.
All right. Let's stop the recording.